What is up, guys? This is Silver Warrior here, and I'm still not used to the way that this camera works. What it does is, every time I go to record, it actually zooms in a lot, so I never know exactly where to angle the shot. But either way, today, as you can tell from the title, obviously, I'm just going to be discussing, kind of like a theoretical situation here, as opposed to like an actual silver stacking advice video, like most of my silver videos are. I just want to talk about, what would happen if every person in the world began silver investing at once. And there's no exact figures on it, but pretty much, it's like maybe 1 to 2% of people actually invest in silver bullion. It's an extremely low amount, and you really only see it in first world countries among the middle class and then upper class, because most people who are living paycheck to paycheck, can't really think about their future at that moment, as opposed to somebody who's middle class and has a little bit of money saved up, who can think, all right, well, for the future I want to have more money, or for the future I just want to protect my wealth or whatever. And same with a wealthy person who probably knows what's going on more than anyone else, because how else did they become wealthy in the first place if they didn't know what was up in the financial world? So if the whole world were to stack, there's multiple ways to look at this scenario. You could look at it from the fact that, what if every person in the world wants to buy silver, but not every person in the world has tangible currency? There's certain countries that have outlawed investing in silver, such as North Korea, and just the system of communism in general outlaws the ownership of silver because it's meant to advance your placing in society. And then you have the fact that not only that, but also, mind you, if every person were to invest in silver, the people that do have money, not everybody has a lot of money. So, what if they were to run out of money? Would that happen? And or you can look at it from the way, well, what if everybody, what if we just took the median amount of money that everyone has, like the average amount of money that a person has, and then we just, decided among everybody that's how much they could spend. So like all basically everybody could spend money theoretically. And then you can look at it from the sense of, how like, let's say you can look at it from the sense that everyone has an unlimited amount of currency to invest in silver and can just keep on investing until the supply were to run out. So you can look at it from any of those ways. You can also, consider, well, does a person just have to spend cash, or can they spend, something like, or not spend necessarily, but let's say, could they sell their house? Could they use their entire net worth? Because everybody in the world, for the most part, has a net worth. Even if you don't have any money that's, in currency, you might have a little house that's worth some money. You might own some land that's worth something. And maybe if in your country that's, if that's not the way it works, because certain countries, people don't buy land from each other. In certain areas, it's kind of like land's passed down through the generation to generation. So you have to kind of consider all of these things when you're thinking about, well, what would happen exactly if everyone started to invest in silver? Now, one way to look at it is, let's say you took all of the world's financial assets, okay? The total value of all financial assets in the entire world is approximately $140 trillion. Now, this means that if we were to say, all right, everyone can liquidate everything and spend $140 trillion. Okay, $140 trillion all at once on silver. What would happen? Well, what we have to figure out to really determine, what would exactly would happen is the kind of rate that people would be buying silver at. Okay, because people wouldn't just be able to go out and buy all at once, right? Theoretically. However, people also couldn't cash in all the world's financial assets at once either. So there's kind of a balance to find here. But if we are taking that $140 trillion in financial assets that people now have to spend on silver, and everyone's just trying to buy as much silver as they can, let's say that they buy it up at a rate of 10% of the world's silver supply per day, okay? Let's say that's the rate. Now what we have to do is determine the entire supply of silver. And there's multiple things to look at for that. See, you can consider, well, what about all the silver that's ever been produced? Okay. Every single piece of silver that's ever been mined, that ever has existed. Okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at that, another way to look at it, I mean, of course, is, well, what about how much silver is available right this second? How much silver do we have right now that we can use? And when you look at it like that, there's a lot less available above ground silver than there is silver total that's ever been mined, and there's even more silver that's predicted to be in the ground. But I think that what we can say is basically the most accurate way to demonstrate what would happen is to say, basically, we'll take all the available above ground silver right now plus an average mining rate of how much silver is mined per year we can look at. However, we also have to consider the fact that silver mining would go up because silver would be such a valuable metal. And you have to consider the fact, well, if people want silver so badly, why wouldn't if everyone's trying to buy it, wouldn't the miners just buy it themselves? But we'll just assume for our purposes that the silver has to go through the refining process first and be refined in a pure bullion before anybody can buy it, and then it'll go out into the market. Just for our purposes, that's what we'll assume. Now, according to the website zerohedge.com, all of the silver currently in existence, and this is, I believe, above ground silver, is 777,276 tons of silver. That's all the silver that is currently available right now that's above ground silver. Now, what we can do is we can take that 776,000 or 777,276, and we're going to have to convert that into troy ounces, okay? Now, it's in 777,276 tonnes, which I believe would mean that, well, I think it's still pronounced tons. It's just that it's metric tons, because it's not just, it doesn't say whether it's metric or not, but based on the spelling, we can say that it is going to be a metric ton, which means, first of all, we have to convert a metric ton to a standard ton, okay? So there's going to be a little bit of math involved in this, but it's really not that difficult. All I'm going to do is I'm going to convert metric tons to standard tons. So now we'll know how many standard tons we have, because, mind you, then we can convert it into standard ounces, and then we can convert standard ounces into troy ounces. That's kind of the simplest way for me personally to do that, being somebody who's based in the U.S. and works more with the imperial system. Okay, so I'm really sorry if you noticed that the camera's moved a little bit. It's because I hit stop recording instead of hitting to unpause. So I'm sorry for that if there was any kind of rough transition. Let's call it from that. But either way, what I did was I took that 777,275 metric tons and converted it into U.S. tons, and we're looking at 856,799.024 U.S. tons of silver total. Next, we're going to want to take that and convert that into U.S. customary ounces. And there's a very easy way to do that, because if you know that there's 1,000 pounds in a ton, and then, or like the weight that's in a ton, and then the amount of ounces that are in a pound, all you have to do is take those two measurements, and then there you go. So what you can really do is you can take 2,000, not 1,000, because that was a mess up. I was thinking of how there's 1,000 kilograms in a metric ton, but no, there's obviously 2,000 pounds in a U.S. ton. So what you can do though is take 2,000, multiply that by 16, because there's 16 ounces in a pound, and then you got 32,000, not just 32, 32,000. And what I can do then is take this number that we have, the 856,799. We can take that, throw it into a calculator, and multiply that by 32,000 to get the amount of ounces that we're going to have in terms of standard ounces. And then the last step, of course, is to convert that into troy ounces. So what we're looking at here is going to be, that number again of 856,799. And I'll throw out the calculator for you guys. So there you go, times that 32,000 is going to give us a total of 417,000. Yeah, if I could read 27 billion, I'm sorry. If I could read that, that'd be really nice. 27,417,568,768. There we go. If I could actually say the correct number, that would have been lovely. But yeah, that's how much we're going to be looking at, is 27 billion ounces. It's standard ounces, though. And actually, I'm thinking about it now, and we actually do not have to take the those standard ounces to convert into Troy, because of the simple fact that I have this amazing app called Coinflation, which what that'll allow me to do is actually take the number, which I'm going to have to do real fast. I'm going to have to copy that number out of the calculator. But what it'll allow me to do is, once I copy that number, I can take that and I can throw it into the calculator that PCGS Coinflation provides, and then just put in 999 fine silver. So if you're wondering, you know exactly what I'm doing. I'm just going into silver scrap, getting rid of that 1 ounce measurement, and then it should let me paste. Alright, well, here's the problem we're going to have now, friends, is that there's a limit on how many characters you can put in. So what I'm going to have to do instead is we're going to have to take 1 standard ounce of silver and figure out how much that's worth. 1470. So silver's worth 1470 per standard ounce. And then what we can do is we can throw this into the calculator, multiply this by 14.7, and then that'll give us 403 billion. $38,260,889.60, and this is all U.S. currency, mind you. So if you're using a different currency, you can convert that. But basically, the value of all the silver in the world is that 403 billion. That's all the above ground available silver. Now you have to remember, most of the silver that's above ground that's ever been mined is not available for sale. Just because it's available silver doesn't mean that it's for sale. This is all the silver that's ever been mined that has not been lost throughout history. This is just all the silver that's available right now. But this includes silver that's in my private collection, and other people who have a lot more silver. It's private collection. You're talking about silver that JP Morgan owns, which is many millions of ounces. I'm talking about all sorts of factors that you'd have to consider. So determining the amount of silver in circulation is simply not possible. But we're being very theoretical, so we're going to assume that all the available silver is for sale. At $403 billion worth of silver is for sale. Now, what we can do is we can say that let's say the mines have decided that, silver is way too lucrative for us to be giving off. We're not going to mine any right now. We're going to wait for the prices to go up. Okay, let's just say that's what they decided. Okay, that we can't afford to give away the silver because the prices are shooting up every day, because that's what would happen. Now, we're assuming that we're going to have 10% of all this silver being bought every single day. And let's say everyone who's buying it is not willing to sell it because they think the price is going to keep on going up. So we have that 403 billion. What we can do is times that by 0.9. And you know what we should do first is probably divide this by 14.7. So we just have the number of standard ounces. So we'd have that 27 billion ounces available. Again, multiply that by 0.9. Now we only have 24 billion the next day. 0.9, 22 billion. 0.9, so this is after, let's say just after 1 week. So after 1 week, if people bought 10% of the silver every day, we'd go from that 27 billion ounces to just 13 billion ounces of silver. That's all that would be left if 10% of the silver was bought every single day. So already we have less than half of our silver left. So what would that do to prices? Well, you see, there is a curve, because you do have to consider that there'd be a huge amount of hype around silver if everyone was trying to get it at once. But there's still many, many ounces available. So let's just say that the price will go with the supply. Okay, let's just say that manipulation wouldn't break. Let's just assume that there's no price manipulation. And I know this video is a lot of assumptions and a lot of theorizing, but mind you, it is a theoretical video. It is not something that would necessarily happen in real life, and it would not happen this way exactly in real life. This is just as close as I can get without being, one of the people that somehow knows every single fact in terms of how much silver is really available in circulation. Those stats aren't just readily available. I've looked for these stats many a time. Unfortunately, these are the closest stats we have, and even these are probably skewed a little bit because, they're just not necessarily, the most truthful facts. So, of course, we don't have to ever worry about running out of money because everyone liquidated all of their financial assets. They have that 175 trillion, so we don't have to worry about that. Everyone's got enough money to just keep on buying. And that's why I figured out, I wanted to determine just how many financial assets would be available. And even if you looked at all the US currency just available in circulation right now, that's still 1.5 trillion. Okay, if you look at all the money that's in, special savings accounts and everything, in the M2 currency supply, then I believe we're looking at, I want to say it was 10.5 trillion or 12.5 trillion. It's definitely a lot more money than you'd need. So we only needed that, what was it? I think all we needed was 403 billion to be able to buy all the silver. So after 1 week, we've already lost more than half the silver supply. Now let's just say that, things continue this way. Everyone would continue to buy 10% of the silver supply. And this is how many ounces we have left after 2 weeks. 6.2 billion. Now, you might be thinking, isn't there a faster way to do this? You do keep on multiplying by 0.09. That's, again, a little bit, old. So, isn't there a faster way? Of course, there is a math equation to figure it out. I'm just trying to kind of give you a visual representation that you can see how much silver would be left after each day. So that's why I'm doing this. But what I'm going to do is multiply this out for you. I'll be right back. I'm going to do a little bit more multiplying on this just so we can see how we look after quite some time. So this is after just 28 days. We'd only have 1.434 billion ounces of silver left. So prices at this point would be skyrocketing. Now what we can do is, let's say after that 28 days, you want to know how much would silver cost then, okay? Well, there's a very, very simple way to figure that out, my friends. We just go, and unfortunately this doesn't go quite back far enough. The calculator doesn't keep our statistics for long enough. But what we can do is we can copy down this number, do not fear, and then we can take, we're going to have to remember just what that number was for the amount of total standard ounces left before. And then what I'm going to do is, just to figure out what it would be, I'm going to take the total amount of standard ounces that are available before and then after, and then what I'll do is what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the one before and divide it by the amount of ounces that are after, and then I'll take that number and multiply it by the original price of silver, and then we'll know exactly how much it would cost, assuming that silver was on the exact price compared to how much was available. Okay, so now we have that total again of 27 million, or billion, 417,568,768 ounces. And you can see this is how much we'd have, that 1,434,000,000 or so. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the 27 billion divided by 1.34 billion, 891,971,000. And points 8097. We'll throw that in there just for accuracy's sake. And then we have that 19.1077581149.8. So the silver supply is decreased by over 19 times. There's more than 19 times less silver than what we started with just 28 days before. Now we can take that price and multiply it by the exact price of silver. That was, the exact value of silver in the customary system. And again, we can, if were forgetting, and then you can always just go back on here, and it's really not that hard to check. And silver prices probably changed a little bit, but you could just go back on here. And yeah, they did change a little bit, because I do believe it was 1470 before, and now it's saying 1472. But of course, we have to assume the same value. Actually, you know what? We don't have to, because come to think of it, it's just statistics. There's no money involved, so we can multiply by 1472 actually, so we have the most accurate price. And there you go. That's the value of 1 standard ounce of silver. That $281, and basically 27 cents. And if you're wondering, what will that be in troy ounces, that's not really that hard to figure out either. All I'd have to do is convert the measurement, but I'm just going by standard ounces just because that's easiest for the moment. But yeah, silver would be $281.26, 27 cents technically, if we're going to round up, per standard ounce. So, which roughly equates to, a little bit over 300 per troy ounce. But either way, that's, pretty expensive right there. $281 per ounce. That's higher than silver's ever been, historically speaking, at least in terms of what a currency that we can relate to. A currency that in the U.S. currency, it's never been quite that expensive, even adjusting for inflation. So now we can just have a little bit of fun. We can take the original amount of 1,434,191,000, and then 971.8097 ounces. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend the time even more. So I'll be right back. So now I've gone to 60 days. This is how much silver would be left. You can see just over the course of a day now, less than 5 million ounces would be consumed if 10% of the silver was still being bought. And your one concern you might have is you're probably thinking, well, people would probably buy silver at a consistent rate. But we're going to assume that 10%, because as silver prices got steeper, people might slow down in their purchasing, and it's just a little bit easier to assume that way. However, only 39,908,419.314511 ounces are left, and it's probably rounding. Number's probably longer than that. It's probably an infinite number at this point. But either way, you can see that just how crazy it's become, with that price, or with that amount of silver. So what we can do now is calculate what the price would be for silver, assuming again the same exchange rate. So again, we can plug in this 27 billion, and what we can do is this time, since we'd only have 39 million ounces left after 60 days, what we'll do is divide it by that 39,908,419.314511. And notice this might be a little bit different on your calculator if yours goes out further or doesn't go out as far as the one I'm using. Let me just make sure I put that number in right. Exactly translated it over so that we don't have any errors there. Alright, everything should be good. We can take that now. And so we're talking about silver has, over the last 60 days, decreased. The available silver has decreased by 687 times. We can then take that and multiply it by 14.72, which we'll just assume is still the value right now. And a standard ounce of silver would cost $10.1 thousand. So just in 60 days, silver would skyrocket to a value of 10.1K per ounce if people tried to buy all the silver in the world. And I do hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found it interesting. Just kind of a theoretical video, just to throw some stuff out there, just to consider what's up with it. And that is it for this one. If you want to see more videos where I, put my math skills to work and figure out, just have a hypothetical situation, let me know. Give me some ideas of what you want to see. Other than that, that is it for this one. Peace, love, in much respect.